Do that.
Hello and welcome to Shooting the Shit.
Hello.
Hello. I'm trying to do my best Rachel Weinhold impression. I am Hannah Weinhold. For those of you who are on Spotify or podcast and think, "Gosh, she sounds exactly the same." It's not Rachel. It's the better looking, more youthful and vibrant sister Hannah, and I'm joined today by
Marisha.
So the fucking children of the group have been let loose to talk about workplace relationships. The two biggest perverts in the Shooting the Shit team are going to talk about why workplace relationships aren't good. It's going to be wild. So anyway, hello, welcome to Shooting the Shit. This is where we sort out feminists and fucking awful people. I was trying to think of something alliterative. And where we smash the patriarchy and where we try and do it with a little bit of a professional slant on it. So today we are talking about workplace relationships. Do they ever benefit your workplace? Are they a feminist issue? Are they bad for your workplace? And how might you handle it? So Marisha, have you ever had a workplace relationship?
Yes.
Tell us in great detail about that, please.
Not in great detail. No, we don't need to talk about that in great detail. But yeah, I have. And on the flip side, I've also worked in companies where I've worked for a husband and wife or with a husband and wife. So I see both sides of the story, and it's fascinating to me, I guess, because I guess if you're the person that's in the relationship, you kind of just you do what you do, right? You just kind of get on with it. But as an external party, you see all the things that shouldn't happen and all the things that you don't want to be happening in the workplace when two people are close in that kind of way. But I personally kind of do just keep them very separate, like my in work relationship versus my out of work relationship. I do try to keep them very, very separate, but I know that's not always easy for everybody, so we have to look at it from both sides.
And sometimes, like, you just meet someone that you like at work, and it happens, doesn't it? And I think it's different when I think like there's two types. One is when it develops in work, and one is when like you're working with a couple who were an existing couple when they came into the business. I think one is like exciting and full of gossip for everybody else, and the other one is a bit more of a ball ache. So, and obviously, I think a lot of it depends as to whether it's good or not on the power balance between the two people in the relationship. So if one of them is the subordinate to the other, then that can get sometimes a bit tricky, but we'll dig into that. I've worked with my husband, but I joined a company that he had already worked for, that he already was working for, rather than us getting together in work or us both joining the same company at the same time. And now I work with Rachel and Dally, who are obviously married, and that has its challenges.
Thank
you. So I've also experienced it from both angles, but I don't think I've ever got together with anybody who I've worked with. But to be fair, not for lack of trying.
For me, it's one of those, like, you just spend like it feels like 100% of your time at work, and it for me, they've developed at work as opposed to getting together outside of work but working together. So
but it happens, doesn't it? Because like you've got a shared interest because you're at work and you spend a lot of time together and you kind of form little alliances against your boss or against other people or whatever, and it's just a natural place for it to develop. But as an employer, I can imagine it's quite tricky to handle.
For sure. When that does happen. Like proper fallout. Do you know what I mean? Like hysterical, screaming and shouting because something, someone's left the dishwasher full or something along those lines. I can imagine it's not fun to have to deal with that, basically, for sure.
Yeah, sorry, the post just comes to the dogs going mental. Yeah, for definite. Like, I hadn't even thought about the falling outside of it. I was just thinking about like them like getting it on in the toilets kind of thing, or the gossip, you know, like the kind of like the early exciting bit, and it like distracting people from the work. So I guess there's like many pitfalls. And I think as well, it very much depends on the sector as to how appropriate it is. So I have worked in education, and like workplace relationships in education get very tricky. I've never had a workplace relationship in education, but I've seen it happen a lot. And of course, there you've got all the rumors from the kids as well. And you know, they all kind of jump on the bandwagon there, and it gets really tricky. What's the juiciest workplace relationship story you've ever heard?
The juiciest. I mean, define juicy. I don't know. Like, I don't think there's anything that's been, you know, untoward or anything that's weird or wonderful. It's just fairly run of the mill. It's not that exciting once it happens, really.
I used to work somewhere, and there were greenhouses. It was a college, and there were greenhouses, and two people were caught shagging behind the greenhouses. But obviously, greenhouses are glass, and therefore see-through.
That's a failure, isn't it? Let's try and hide behind this glass.
Yeah, no one will see us here. So yeah, that was quite amusing. I have got some others as well, but I don't want to say it in case they're listening.
Yeah, the actual. If you were to ask other people I've worked with, I'm probably the subject. So we'll move on.
Well, yes, you are. So, Marisha, have you ever sexually assaulted anybody when they were loading the dishwasher?
All the time, whenever I can, to be honest. So yeah.
You're known for your wandering hands, aren't you? Like Mr. Tickle, like really long arms.
No.
Your colleagues.
This is not down the office relationships route. This is the HR sexual harassment route. So we'll leave that for another conversation.
And we will come back to it because it's a good conversation. Okay, so there are different kinds of workplace relationships. There's ones where, and to be clear, we're talking about the sexual variety. So there's ones where you're working with couples, and there's ones where couples are formed during the workplace. But what do you suppose that there are any benefits to that?
I think, to be honest, I think I don't know. I don't know if there's a real benefit to the business, for that. I mean, because you could argue that if you're working with people, then you form a bond. It doesn't have to be, through a sexual relationship or one of those that style of relationship. You form bonds with people that you work with. So, it's just about working together well with people. So I can't off the top of my head, I can't think of a true standalone benefit for people being in a relationship at work, other than car sharing.
Well, that is a benefit though, isn't it? Like, it means it's easier for people to get into work. Their costs are lower, and therefore they're less likely to leave because they need to, earn more money. I think as well, there's more of a vested reason, there's more of a vested interest in the business. So if you are getting a lift to work with your partner, and you both work there, and you've got both incomes are reliant on that company, you're less likely to leave because it leaves the other person there, and you're more likely, you've got an interest in the company succeeding because both your wages are relying on it. So I do think kind of making life easier for people, it's bound to reduce your turnover. The other thing is, you don't look sure about that.
No, I'm not sure about that at all. I think that's a real stretch. Sorry, but that's fine.
I think when Dave and I worked together, I was more reluctant to leave than I would have been. Because I didn't want him to be, and sometimes when you leave a job, there's ill feeling, isn't there? And I didn't want him to be stuck with that ill feeling. I never felt like I could do anything naughty because I didn't want to jeopardize his career as well. So I was better behaved, and I stuck around for longer than I probably would have done.
Well, that's interesting. That's a real like, and that's I don't say that taking the piss. I like as I usually do. That is
Yeah,
quite
interesting.
an interesting angle because I've never thought of it like that. It really like has doesn't hasn't come to my mind. But if that's how people feel about things, then all good.
Mm, that's how I felt. The other thing is as well that our old boss got so much extra time out of us because we would discuss work at home. We would come up with ideas at home. I remember one time we were sat in bed at like 11 o'clock at night discussing things that we'd got a timetable in for a meeting the next day. So we didn't have the meeting. We just had the meeting at 11 o'clock at night in bed. Like it's like bloody John and Yoko, but really boring.
Right.
Yeah,
But
so
I guess on if you kind of think of it that way, then yeah, you do because like there is just more work chat, isn't there, just by default, usually. I guess I mainly look at it from the other side of things that it is just work chat or it can be just work chat. So actually, sometimes there's no time off. I think you have to really, separate the work together time versus the home together time because otherwise they just encroach
oh
continually.
yeah, as one half of the couple, it's the pits, but
Mm,
as an employer,
mm.
like you benefit from that. I suppose as well, though, there could be a disadvantage because they could plot against you. Oh,
Well, that's it. Yeah, but I think even I guess it just depends on the work environment anyway, doesn't it? Because I think we now work in smaller businesses or work for ourselves and things like that, and I can't comment for how it would be if you were in a hospital or if you were in the police force or the fire for or do you know what I mean, or something along those lines. So I think it is very much dependent on sector as well, and there's so much that's kind of tied up in all of that.
mm,
That yeah, I wouldn't want to really comment on it, but I'm sure it's very different in those types of situations for obvious
mm.
reasons, right?
Unfortunately, you are here to comment, so
No, but I just
I know what you mean. I know what you
you
mean.
know what I mean? Like, if we were gonna go, I'm feeling like I'm conjuring up ITV shows here in my head where there's some kind of like police drama and your other half is, being kidnapped or is being held at gunpoint and, it's your job to remain completely, separate and, take the job first. That's where my brain is, and
I would watch that show. I probably have watched the
I
show.
think I've seen it on Netflix rather than ITV. However, in those types of, it's not like life or death, like, dealing with someone's, phone line, do you know what I mean? Or somebody's, SEO. So
Confusing.
it's a little bit.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I think, though, so another benefit that I came across, which I would also argue is quite tenuous, is that it makes it easier to recruit because people will recommend, if you kind of allow workplace relationships and encourage them, then people will recommend their spouses or whatever for jobs. And it means that you've kind of got a kind of like informal reference. If you work with an absolute dickhead of a colleague and they say, why don't you employ my partner? And then you're going to think, absolutely not. But if you've got like someone who's really good and they say, employ my partner, then it's potentially, that's a benefit that I read, but I think that's a bit tenuous, don't you?
I'm liking these. I'm learning. I'm learning.
Yeah, it's really informative. Moving on then to point number two, which is number three, which is when are they bad? Marisha,
Well,
what are some downsides that you can see to sexual relationships at work?
I think it's it comes from familiarity more than anything. I think there's and it I can't speak for everybody obviously, but in the workplaces I've been in where I've worked with couples, then it's that I think there's twofold. I mean, there is that. I mean, there's the obvious, if there's a falling out, then it comes into the workplace. And to be honest, I take that with a bit of a pinch of salt because it's obvious. You know what I mean? It's clear. I think where I personally struggle with working with people is actually like on the flip side of the benefit of, two people having a, informal meeting in the living room, because they talk between themselves, and then there's an assumption that everybody else knows what's going on. And so there's always a, this like, yeah, difference of communication. And it's that I struggle with in the workplace more than anything when I'm working with a couple, because they naturally end up talking about business, whilst being at home. And it's trying to keep up with that.
For sure. It's such a good point. And I think as well, on top of that, confidentiality can be a problem. So when Dave and I worked together, I had oversight of HR, so people's salaries. And whilst I never divulged that to Dave in any hint or anything, I personally, as an employer, might have been a bit nervous about that, having, worrying that might just be kind of dropped into conversation, or just a total, like, obvious breach of confidentiality, passing that shit on. So yeah, I think that can be a major drawback to it. What else?
What else? Well, I can only think of those reasons, to be honest, is the biggest. I'm not, getting into the actual, sex and being affectionate and all of that kind of stuff,
Oh,
because
go on, get into the sex. That's the best bit of it.
well, that's like, that's a defined relationship. Is it a one-off? Like how oh, no, it's not even a relationship, is it? It's actually romances, workplace romances. So actually it could be a one-off. It could be a night out, where you all get pissed up and, someone goes off shagging somebody else. And, yeah, as a negative of that, there's almost a whole bunch of stuff that comes with that, right? They could fall out, they could of one of a million different reasons, and then bring that into the workplace, which then escalates into a HR issue. So I wouldn't want to be involved in those conversations. Joe, if you're watching or listening, I'm talking about you, right? So she's HR Joe, that is.
Oh yeah, Joe Monroe. Yeah, Monroe, we need you on this.
It may well start off as a bit of fun or a bit of harmless flirting or whatever, and if someone takes something the wrong way or says something wrongly, or inappropriately, that's deemed inappropriate, or somebody wants to be vindictive in some way, shape or form, then it can all go horribly wrong, right? So
yeah, like, we like to pretend that we're all really adult and mature, but actually, we're just school kids at heart. And like, workplace bullying is a very real issue. And I think if you're having, I think there can be a lot of jealousy and ill feeling that can happen in workplace relationships and workplace romances, especially in kind of larger offices. I think as well, one of the problems could come from people thinking that others have got an unfair advantage, kind of shagging your way to the top, or that they get preferential treatment, especially where there's an imbalance of power, and a kind of subordinate is going out with their superior, and their superiors gives them a promotion or takes them on a sales trip or whatever. I think that can cause a lot of ill feeling and lead to some very nasty accusations, which I guess HR are like honor bound to follow up.
Yeah, for sure. And as well, there's also, sometimes the elephant in the room is like, if somebody is with somebody else, and maybe one of those is really shit at their jobs, and it just gets in the way. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, because feelings come into play, and this, that, and the other. So yeah, I agree.
Plus, not everybody in a relationship is a nice person. Some people turn into bullying, coercive arseholes. So, if you're in a relationship with a bullying, coercive arsehole and you work with them, then that means that you potentially have to leave your job. You're unsafe. It's a headache, not a headache. It's a safeguarding issue for HR, and it's awkward.
I think as well, there is, I think we have to be mindful, because you asked at the beginning, is it a feminist issue? And I think, there's I love a wild assumption, every time I talk. And it's almost like going back to that 50s and 60s. You know what I mean? Like if if there is a relationship, or if there is a one night stand or whatever, it's always going to be the female that's going to be the one that's hysterical about the whole situation. Do you know what I mean? Or like going off and crying and screaming because things haven't worked out. And it's I would assume that kind of misconception is still there. Do you know what I mean? It's like that's just what people think is going to happen, when somebody rather than actually being grown up and just kind of moving on from it.
And I bet in a lot of places it does. I bet in a lot of places there is screaming and hysterics from, not just from the women, from everybody. I bet there is a lot of that, and I bet there's a lot of kind of harassment and bullying off the back of it as well. Like, it must be awful.
For sure. And I think, again, I do think there's there is, like you say, a potential for safeguarding and safety and all of that kind of stuff that comes into conversation sometimes, just because, let's face it, whether you worked with them or not, people, lots of people can be a bit unhinged or a bit mental, right? So it does come into the workplace sometimes too.
In a small business, so obviously Rachel and Dali are married. And in a small business, one of the that fucking dog
today.
I don't know what's wrong with you. I know Yub is driving me nuts today. So in Grow Traffic, I know that there's kind of an assumption that if you've spoken to one, you've spoken to the other.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Because that actually leads into a little bit with what I was saying with that, like, at home conversation. There is assumptions that come from that, and the people that I've worked with, like, don't assume because you've spoken to me it means that the next person knows. So you say, okay, well, I'll make sure I have the conversation twice. But then it's like, why are you telling me this? We've already told me that. Like, so and so told me last night. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, you have to run that gauntlet each time sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it doesn't happen in Grow Traffic, but I could imagine it does. So there is a family dynamic, as most people know. So Rachel and I are sisters, and Dali is married to Rachel. So I never feel like I'm being ganged up on by those two. But I think sometimes Dali feels he's been ganged up on by us too. But that's not my problem. But so I think I could imagine it could be quite tricky, that there's a bit of like a ganging up thing going on.
Mm-hmm. For sure. We're probably not the best placed people to talk about this, because I'm quite chill about the whole situation, to be honest.
If you want, I don't care.
Exactly, yeah. Just don't make a mess and be grown up with it when you're finished. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think people can't. So as an employer, what could you do to safeguard yourself? Now, I have got a few tips. So one thing you could do as an employer is have a kind of employee declaration form and a policy whereby you ask people to declare a workplace relationship. But I think you would need to define that. So, like, does a workplace relationship consist of a quick fumble in the toilets on a works do, or do you have to have a sustained relationship? Like, you could maybe say, like, you must have had, by the time you've had sex 3 times, you must tell your employer.
Yeah. Which case that everyone knows your business anyway.
Yeah. Put it on the whiteboard up here every time you have sex. Candies, keep it to yourself. So you could do that. And you could also require your existing, your colleagues to snitch. How do you feel about snitching, Reish?
Well, this is it. I think this actually, comes into, one of the biggest issues, I guess. And it's like that whole, like, dramatic ITV, moment is like the conflict of interest, right? That is, as an employer, that is the biggest concern, because what comes first, like, literally. So
You're the man.
Things are coming out my mouth and I realise it after a bit. Anyway, it's fine. It's I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't know how I would kind of deal with or manage that kind of stuff. I find it's like you say, you kind of with a lot of these things almost kind of think ahead, and put something in place before it happens.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah.
having some real basic stuff in place as an employer, when you bring somebody else into the business because you never know. And at least if you've got some outlining kind of um, processes and procedures before you start, you can always build on those, but it's very hard to do something about it after something's happened, right? That's when you get the professionals in afterwards.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's always better like to sort it out first, isn't it?
Yeah.
Another thing that you could do is just talk to them, like agree what's appropriate. So if somebody declares a workplace relationship, or if you've got a workplace relationship that you're feeling nervous about, just talk to your superior about it, or your line manager, or even HR, and just say, where are we going with this? As an employer, you could say this is what's appropriate, this is what's not appropriate, and kind of review it. But it is a good idea to have a policy in place now, as you're saying, rather than bolting the door. What is it? Bolting the door after the horse is bolted, or whatever.
Something like that.
Something
I
like
can't
that.
even correct it because I know what you're trying to say, but I don't know what the words are. So
Don't run after the horse once you've shut the door. Something like that. Something like that.
we'll cross that horse bridge when we get to it.
We'll clip flop over that bridge. I think the other thing is, as an employer, like consider when it's appropriate to get involved in the personal life of your employees. Like get your fingers out of the pies. Marisha, you froze then in a very unfortunate position on my screen. Like so, they have a right to a private life, and you don't need to be getting all up in the grill about who they're shagging.
Well, this is very true, and it comes down to does it affect your business?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to: is does it affect the business?
Mm.
So,
Have you ever broken up with anybody at work?
yeah.
Oh, how did that go?
Yeah, it'll be fine. I mean, not at work, but we've worked together and we've continued to work together afterwards. And that's the thing. I think that's where I struggle because in this conversation, because for me it is work is here and life is here, and when it comes to that kind of stuff, like, can I still work with somebody? Yes, no. Whether they can work with me or not is a different conversation, right? But
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I think but again, I'm coming at that from being of an age as well. If it had happened when I was 18, for example, 21, then maybe it's going to be a very different conversation. I can't remember then, to be honest. I didn't. So yeah, it's
Well, I was caught in a love triangle when I was about 20.
a love triangle. Honestly, this is
Well,
not.
it was more like it was a love chain, if I'm honest, like a daisy chain, but not in like the gay sex kind of way. So a boy liked me and I liked a different boy, and it was awkward. And the boy that I liked didn't like me, and the boy that liked me I didn't like. So it was all very awkward. But I think that was a lot to do with age. Don't look at me like that. So yeah, I think a lot of it, is how mature you can be. And at 20, the answer was not fucking very.
I think as well, there's a whole lot, as an employer, I just looked at something online as well, and I think there's you've got to be very careful in terms of like discrimination and stuff like that as well. So if it's about being aware but not treating people differently because of it. So I think that's a very interesting / difficult one too, right? It's a fucking minefield. I don't want to do it. This is why I don't employ people. So I can't deal with this level of drama and stress. I'll tell Joe Monroe immediately and say, fix it,
please. Yeah, you do. Everyone just needs a Joe Monroe in their life, an HR extraordinaire who can sort it all out for you.
Exactly.
Have you got any final words before we put this lame fucking pony out of its misery?
Well, I'm sure. No, I haven't got any final words today because I think it's just a very difficult thing to maneuver around. And luckily I haven't had to deal with it, and had to deal with any major fallout. But I think, yeah, we'll leave it at that. Because I'm not willing to divulge what has or hasn't happened to me. That's all that you want to know, right?
Yeah, I mean, this has been incredibly disappointing.
Have I been caught? No, I haven't. Have I been involved where somebody has said, someone else won some business because I was with them? Yes, they have, or potentially. I didn't know there was a problem at the time, but apparently it was a problem. Have I dealt with somebody that is now some kind of praise stalker afterwards through meeting them from work? Yes, that's happened as well. So there's quite a lot of history. But
I mean, we've talked for 30 minutes and you just sneak this in at the end. You could have kicked us off with this.
It's by design. I'm not going to let that's it. It's just a quick summary of the bullshit I get myself into. It's not recommended. Don't do it, people. It's very stressful. Yeah.
Oh, but you deal with it like an adult, and that's the main thing.
I do try.
Good. Well,
you got any final thoughts on this, though?
No. No, I haven't actually got any final thoughts other than, shag who you want and don't do it behind a greenhouse because they can still see you. My final thought.
This has been very interactive, very informative.
Very informative. Yes, I hope everybody has taken something incredibly useful away from it. So if you are watching us on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're listening to us on a podcast, leave us a review because it really does help. If you are watching it on the Facebook, please comment with your juicy life experiences from having sex with your workmates because I want to read them because I'm nosy. And I'm going to go and grill Marisha off screen. So that's I'm going to make everybody as uncomfortable as possible. Yay!
Oh, this really makes people want to, join in with the conversation.
Oh, yeah, join in, yeah. So it is Valentine's Day next weekend, and then the week after we will be talking about romance tropes and how fucking sexist they are or how unsexist they are. And we've got Jo joining us who will talk about, she's obviously an editor of Mills and Boon, or she was an editing, an editor manager at Mills and Boon, and now she works at a different place, and she's very good. She'll be cross with me now. Okay, so yeah, join us next time. Bye.